Hello, hello. Welcome to another week of grief relief with myself and my friend Deborah Devine. We have a very serious topic to discuss today, and I will start the conversation when Deborah joins us. I'd like you to know that the material that we're going to discuss today will be sensitive, and I'm hoping that you're able to join us in this revealing conversation, either here live or when you're watching on. So, hello, hello.
Hello.
How are you, my friend?
What a pleasure to be um, a visitor on your wonderful page. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for inviting me.
Oh my goodness, it was about time I returned the favor in some ways. We've been doing this every week on your page, and I've had, you know, no issues with that because it's always a pleasure to be part of your space and your page, but also to mutually share all our conversations on our platforms. We've had incredible responses from people. We've been talking about grief. We've been talking about our journeys, in particular with the transitioning of my mom and my experience. And I've been completely open and vulnerable and honest and authentic in every aspect of that.
I just want to let you know that I'm feeling very much kind of like on a hair trigger, very emotional today. And it feels so wonderful to know that you have created a wonderful safe space for everybody to feel their feelings.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. And
Oh,
I'm probably going to bawl my eyes out, and I can't find my hankies. I got this. I got, oh, I got some hankies here. I think it's going to be a two hanky night, honestly.
my,
And
yeah. And I sort of started talking a little bit about today, and I did mention when I went live before you logged on that today is going to be a little sensitive with the things that I'm going to be speaking about. And I'm hoping that people will join us with an open mind and support and hold space for us as we talk about this, because we've talked about just about everything except for one thing. And this is something that I have not been able to vocalize or speak about since it happened on the day that my mom passed away. I've still, and to this day, experienced a lot of trauma because of the incidents that took place. Um, and I thought about many ways of sharing this story. And now that we're approaching where it's been 8 months almost to the day since my mom transitioned, it's been festering in me for so long and building and building. And I would go from anger and sadness and anger and sadness. And now I feel like I'm in a place where I'm strong enough to at least talk about it, because every time I tried to write about it, I just couldn't sit down to pen the words because it was so hard to go through all of that all over again. But I figured since we've been, like you said, creating this safe space and the conversations that we've had have been so enlightening, and I feel like now I'm in a place where I could be strong enough and comfortable enough to talk about what took place on the day that my mom transitioned. And I want the intention for this to be very clear. One is that it is from a place of responsibility that I share this story, because I really want to do the best that I possibly can to make sure that no other person ever in the care of our healthcare system, no matter what level, goes through what we went through. And I promised my mom on her dead body that I would find a way to hold the people accountable for the way that she was treated. And I promised her that I would find a way to tell the story of what happened. And it is only now, almost 8 months later, that I'm able to talk about this. My mom's name is Katundala. Her last name spelled Dhalla, and her first name is spelled Khatton. On October 28th, 2020, my mom was taken and admitted to Scarborough Grace General Hospital. I want to also go on record that that is not a hospital that we regularly have gone to, and we, given the history of our family between my mom, my father, both my grandmothers and my aunt, have been to many hospitals in our city. In particular, we are most familiar with Sunnybrook and North York General. In particular, North York General. North York General has served our families over the years with tremendous compassion, with support, and I want to say probably excellent healthcare, though there have been issues in the past, but I've never experienced anything like what we went through at Scarborough Grace General Hospital. I'm going to get to as much of the details and content as possible, but if you're watching this now, please note that this is a warning to everyone out there and their loved ones that you have to advocate, you have to be present, you have to sometimes fight. And today, this is all of those three things on behalf of my mom. She was admitted during the day. That night, I called the emergency department to check on her. And an emergency nurse picked up the phone. And my question was, is my mom okay? Now, I didn't know much at that point. I just knew that she was taken by an ambulance. Because of COVID, I was not allowed to be with her. I was not allowed to see her. I was not allowed to talk to her, and she couldn't come to the phone. So my only form of communication was with the emergency nursing department at that time. And the response I got was, well, if she was okay, she wouldn't be in the hospital. That was only the beginning. First of all, I have never had anyone speak to me that way at any time, at any hospital. And given the fact that this nurse was fully aware that perhaps my mom's condition was serious, I did not receive or hear in their tone of voice any form of compassion, sensitivity, or any other form of information that would provide me some form of comfort. Even if I needed to know what the reality of the situation was, I was simply told, well, if she wasn't okay, she wouldn't be in the hospital. That was just the beginning. What I did learn from a hospital emergency physician was that they were testing her for a potential, what they thought might be congestive heart failure. They were going to do a bunch of tests. So I still didn't know all the results of the information that had taken place until the next morning when I received a call. I spoke to the nurse in what was now the cardiac department of Scarborough Grace Hospital. She tried to tell me a little bit of information other than this situation was kind of serious, but she didn't really give me the details. But the doctor was walking by and he came on the phone. This was Dr. what I believe his name is Dr. Finkelstein. in the cardiac department of Scarborough Grace Hospital. He confirmed that my mom was in congestive heart failure. He also said to me that he had never in his life seen anyone with a level of carbon dioxide like my mom. It was the highest he had ever seen it. Based on the information he provided, he suggested that the best thing that they do is just keep her comfortable because of her morbidities, her frailness, that it was not a good idea to do any sort of treatment that would probably just potentially cause her more harm. I asked if I could see her, and he put the nurse on the phone, and I was given permission to go to the hospital. That was the good part, that I was able to see her and that I was able to be with her. And so I went straight to the hospital. And you can imagine my state of mind. You can imagine how the news had hit me. And you could also imagine that just 24 hours before I was with my mom and we were talking and we were able to converse. And within that short period of time, I was told we're just making her comfortable. And so this was the scenario that they had set me up for. When I arrived to the hospital, strict COVID protocols were in place, which I followed. I put on the gown, I put on the mask, I put on the gloves. And when I went in, I stayed by my mom's bedside, just in complete disbelief as to what was happening. But I'm going to fast forward to the part of this conversation that needs to be told. Soon after, when I was with my mom, all of a sudden, her eyes flung open wide. Her teeth and jaw were clenching, and she was twitching, and her hands and fist went into an extremely tight grip. And I knew immediately what was happening was a seizure. And I started screaming for help and asking for the nurse to come. I ran into the halls. I started yelling help. I went back to my mom, just holding her hand, trying to provide as much comfort as possible. By the time the nurse came into the room, the seizure had stopped. And I'm going to use the word seizure because it was confirmed that this is what had happened. And I will talk about that later in this conversation. But when the nurse came in and I told her what happened, her response was, well, I didn't see it. And she turned around and walked out. And I said, excuse me, wait. What do you mean you didn't see it? Does that mean you're assuming that it didn't happen? She goes, well, I didn't see it, so there's nothing I can do. If it happens again, call me. And she left out in a huff, like I interrupted something that was so important, and completely neglected the fact that something extremely serious is happening to my mom. Given the fact that we're in the cardiac unit, given the fact that we're told to just keep her comfort, it should have clued into the seriousness of the situation. And that was the response that I got. And she walked out. I was completely numb. I was completely dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that that had happened. But shortly thereafter, it happened again. My mom started seizing. Her eyes flung wide open. Her teeth were clenching and she was twitching, and her hands and limbs were in complete state of contraction and stress, and I was trying to hold her while I was screaming for the nurse to come. And this time, a different nurse came in, the nurse that I had spoken to on the phone in the morning that had given me the instructions of what to do when I came to the hospital. And her response to me was, well, I didn't see it. And I said, can you get the doctor? And she said, yes, I'll try. And she walked out again. And I was left again in that situation, not knowing what to do. Nobody was willing to help. No one was listening to me. Nobody was even checking her. Even after what I had claimed, what I'd witnessed, no one came to check her. No one checked her vitals. No one checked her blood pressure, her temperature, or whatever it is that you do when somebody has had a seizure. They just left her. At that point, I was given permission to switch places with my brother so that he could come and see her because we were only allowed one person in the room at a time. And what had transpired while he was with her was exactly the same thing. My mom had another seizure, and he ran out to get the nurse. And by the time they came back, it had stopped. So all she said to him was, well, the next time it happens, just press the red button and we'll come. And again, nobody checked her. Nobody even did anything. And my brother asked if the doctor could come or someone could come and check her. In the meantime, he came back downstairs after he said his goodbyes and had his moments with her, and he told me what happened. And I said, I know, it had happened while I was there. And to my knowledge, it had happened now 3 times, because these are the 3 times that we had witnessed it. There could have been other times that we weren't aware of, but because nobody was with her and no one else was in the room and she wasn't being monitored or checked, we didn't know. And so I ran upstairs to the room to be with her. And then it happened again. And this time I pressed the button. But again, by the time the nurse came, it was over. There was no more seizure. And again, they said, well, I didn't see it. Well, what was the point of telling us to press the button? And why didn't anybody tell us what to do in case that it happened again? So I was left here once again in complete horror and disbelief, asking desperately for somebody to come and see her, for a doctor to come, to check her, to tell me why was this happening? What were they going to do about it? Instead, there was nothing. And then I went out to the desk and I said to the nurse, I need to see the doctor now. I want to speak to him. So she called and she said, he's here again. So when she said that, I knew that they had called him, but he had not come. So he strolled out, this Dr. Finkelstein, out of a room, and he said, what can I do for you? And I told him what I saw. And he said to me, well, how do you know it's a seizure? And I described to him, I said, this is what I saw. And then he said to me that because of the fact that she has a high carbon dioxide level, that seizures can happen. So he knew that this could happen. He knew that she had the highest level of carbon dioxide that he had ever seen in a patient, and he did not let his nurses know to watch for this. He did not put any directions as to what to do in case something like this happened. Instead, it took me 4 times to get the nurses to get to him to come in and check my mother. And the result of that was he administered a medication that is an anti-seizure medication, and that was injected into the IV that was in my mom's arm. And it was only at that point that something had been done. But it doesn't even end there. And so I left the room to allow my niece to go into my mom's room so that she could say her goodbyes. We got permission so that she could come. And I waited for her to come out. And then as I was returning to the room, the same nurse that I'd spoken to on the phone in the morning, the same nurse that I'd spoken to in regards to it about the seizure, who said, I didn't notice anything. This is the head nurse at the cardiac unit, said to me, your mother's fine, she's resting comfortably. And I went into the room, and yes, she was resting comfortably because she had died between the time my niece had left and I had switched places with her. She was resting comfortably. Thank you for checking on her. You didn't even notice that she had died. And so I went into the room again, noticed that she had passed away within less than a minute. I checked her pulse. I checked the tone and the color of her skin. And it was clear to me that she had died. And after breaking down and crying over her body, I ran out screaming to get the nurse. The same nurse came in and she quickly checked my mom's pulse. She gave me a few minutes and then she made obviously a call, because I guess the procedure is that they bring in another doctor to check on the patient to confirm that they had actually passed away. And so that doctor came and she was there. It was a female. I do not know her name. And the nurse that had called her was there. And no one told me what was going to happen next. No one told me to step out of the room while they checked my mother's vitals. I witnessed them opening up her pupils and checking to see if she was alive. I witnessed her checking her pulse while I stood over her. And then when they went to check her heart rate with the stethoscope, my mother's breast was exposed. And it was at that point that I stood up and turned around. There was absolutely no dignity offered to her or to me. There was no compassion offered to my mother or myself. There was absolutely no sincerity, empathy, anything that makes what should be a primary requirement for any healthcare practitioner in our system. None of that. You could be the walking dead and be a nurse or a doctor at that hospital, and they would hire you, because basic human compassion and all of the things that I mentioned were non-existent. And not only that, but there was absolutely no religious sensitivity. The fact that my mom is Muslim, that she is being exposed like that in front of her son, there was no religious or cultural sensitivity whatsoever. The ethics by which this hospital operates are atrocious and anything less than human. I have been left with these memories. I have been left with these images. And it was when they were done that I turned around and I cried over my mom's dead body. And I said, I am so sorry that you died in this horrible place. I have no idea if my mother died in peace. I have no idea if she transitioned in peace, other than the fact that what I saw was the seizures and everything that she experienced. Was she in pain? I don't know. I have been left with these memories. I have been left with these images, and I am haunted by them, and I am completely unable to, I have not been able to speak about it until now. And I want everybody to hear about this, to know that I told my mother that I would not rest until I ensured that this never, ever, ever happened to anyone in any of our medical system again. This may be just one example, but I guarantee from the conversations that I have had from other people who happen to be racialized individuals as well, experience very similar behavior at Scarborough General Hospital through the staff. Our patients, our loved ones have been mistreated, and I have been her caregiver, my mother's caregiver, for years. And I cannot believe, with all the love and everything that I provided for her, that I had to witness and see this in our hospital system. I want this to be public. I want everyone to see the pain that I've been in, to experience the horror, because no tweet, no post on social media, no letter to the hospital could ever express the tone of the anger and the pain that I'm in because of the treatment that my mother received. And I will not rest until I know that there is change on all levels, from the very top, from the board of directors, all the way down to the practitioners that are in direct contact and in the care of our loved ones. Your website where you talk about treating patients with dignity is BS. Your website that talks about compassionate care is BS. Everything that you describe as far as your care in regards to caring of international and a diverse patients at your hospital is also BS. I was not given any form of cultural sensitivity, compassion, or care as a loved one of an individual, let alone the way my mother was treated. Make no mistake, I will make sure that there is change in the system for every patient that enters in that hospital. And this, my friends, is just the beginning. I'm here to not only expose the way my mother's been treated, but to bring light to every aspect of your hospital from the top down, because there is a huge conflict in what you say you are and what you do you are. We deserve better.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. You didn't have to go through that.
And I don't even know how to heal from that. I've tried. I haven't even been able to bring it up with my therapist. What do I say? I haven't been able to even talk about it. And I need this story to be heard. I need this story to be shared. Because don't assume that if it hasn't happened to you, that it won't, because it can.
I can't even imagine how painful, horrifying, how awful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's taken me almost 8 months. And each week we have authentically and vulnerably talking and sharing. And I knew that this was the platform to have this conversation. We've created the space, and I pray to God that the right people see it, because every person that sees it can potentially be saving the life of their loved one or themselves.
I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I could be there to give you a hug.
Oh.
There's something wrong with the way we handle death and dying. It's a natural part of life, and we're not prepared for it. We're not prepared. We don't have the tools to walk into a situation kind of girding ourselves, bracing ourselves. We're not taught those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then another layer, of course, is the staff burnout that happens. Even pre-COVID, there, you know, have been problems for a long time. And it's no excuse.
There's no justification. None. We're not even talking about one person. We're talking about everyone who I even spoke to from the different areas of that hospital. We're not talking about one person.
You know, I ask myself, you see certain people in the system, and you had some experiences with other care providers, and they were exemplary.
Yes.
And then you have another group who, and I ask myself, are these people monsters and then they're just, this is their job? Or do they become monsters because they can't manage the trauma of being in that environment themselves? They're not given the tools that they need either. They have no patience. It's probably the wrong word, but
But I'm
they're,
assuming that if you want to be a healthcare practitioner, that to some degree you want to help people. You have the basic human emotional capacity to feel empathy. You have the basic emotional capacity to feel compassion. You have the basic emotional capacity to just serve from a place of wanting to help. And I saw none of that. None of that. Not even, like, my mom's died. Ask me to step out of the room while you examine her. I don't know what's happening in here. I didn't know what I was going to face. Cover her chest when you're going to check her heart. And even if it had been an accident and her breast popped out, grab a towel, do something. Suggest I should turn away. No regard for my emotional well being for what has just happened and what is about to happen. None. None whatsoever. I'm horrified. I've worked in hospitals all over the world. I've worked in hospitals in Pakistan. I've worked in hospitals in Ontario and in Toronto as a physiotherapist. I've done hospital training as a student. I've never in my life witnessed that. Ever. Ever. And it's not just my story. There are others because I have been talking to other people. Make note. There are others who know exactly what I'm talking about, and they have experienced it too. And in particular, the racialized community, the marginalized community of this diversely accepting hospital. It breaks my heart in a million pieces. We're not just talking about my mom. There is a bigger conversation here, a much bigger conversation. And systems need to be in place to evaluate with what they're claiming to be as far as their ethics, their so-called 4 pillars that they stand on. Whatever.
oh my God. I'm so sorry that this happened.
Yeah. We have some comments here. Ali Alada says change is needed. Yes, I agree. Somebody else is saying all we can do is send prayers and more prayers to your mom. She's in heaven. I believe she's at peace now. What I struggle with is knowing whether or not she suffered those last minutes, those last hours. Why didn't they give her that medication sooner? Why did the doctor wait for me to come 4 times to the desk and to sound like I was annoying them when the nurse said to the doctor on the phone, he's back again? Are you kidding me?
You know, I really, again, come back to this idea that we're not prepared for death. We're not prepared. We don't have, when you go for a job interview, you prepare. You figure out what's going on with the company. You know what the job is. You have kind of a system where you're preparing for something that's going to happen. Dying is one of the biggest things that happens in our lives, whether it's a loved one or a colleague or
It's the one guarantee we know.
exactly. And yet we're so unprepared. We don't know what goes on in the hospitals. If you're a healthy person, the last place you show up is a hospital. And it is, I agree, truly heartbreaking and shocking to see how things are handled. And for there to be in Scarborough, where there's so much diversity, to not have the training for staff
No,
around.
no. There's some people that are just joining on, and I just want them to know that the conversation we're having right now is in regards to the day my mother passed away and the horrific way that she was treated in the hospital. I've made a statement finally after almost 8 months, and I haven't been able to talk about it, but my mother was incredibly neglected. She suffered, which have been confirmed, seizures on that last day, and none of the nursing staff was willing to help call the doctor. And I was left with the trauma of witnessing how she was seizing and calling the nurses multiple times, and each time being told that because they didn't see it, there was nothing they could do. And I am also traumatized by the way in which my mother was treated when after she passed, when the examining doctor did not ask me to step out of the room, and I had to witness and see her eyeballs being pulled open, her pulse being checked, and her breast being exposed while they checked her heart rate. And it is at that point that I turned around because I couldn't take it anymore. But no one even suggested that I step out of the room while they check her dead body. I am completely tormented by what I have seen and witnessed. I'm completely horrified by the treatment my mother has received. And I have now only begun to talk about it with the intention to be able to best be of service to others that are there who have loved ones who are in the hospital right now, because I never want anyone else to go through what I went through ever again. Each week we've been talking on here on grief relief and dealing with the various ways that I've been coping with the loss of my mom. And this has been the one thing over the last 8 months I have not been able to talk about until now. And so this dialogue is going on record because I want people to know what I've experienced. I want people to know what I am feeling. And I want this message to be shared globally. Whether you're in Toronto or someone that has been to Scarborough Grace Hospital where this happened to my mom and my family, it could happen in any hospital. We need to be more compassionate. We need to be more loving. We need to be more kind. We need to be basic human beings, especially now. I understand that our current situation with the pandemic has stressed us all to the max. But if we lose our basic human capacity to care and be kind, the things that we are made of, we will never heal from the collective trauma of the pandemic. We will never move forward. We will be left with just pain. We will be left with anxiety. We'll be left with all the emotions that we haven't been able to process and move forward through. But if you're a healthcare provider, if you are providing basic care and you don't have the capacity to treat a patient with kindness, with compassion, and give them dignity, basic humanity, then you need to just step out and find something else to do with your life, because no one deserves what my mom went through. No one.
In that telling of what happened, do you feel differently right now than you did before you told the story?
I don't want to say that I feel relief, because I don't. I think what I feel is finally the capacity to acknowledge what I've been experiencing, that I've been able to finally vocalize it, but I don't feel relief. What I do feel is a deep fire energy to try to help create change. And it is only when I see it, it is only when I see change, then I'll actually feel some form of relief. But I swore on my mother's dead body that I would do my best to make sure that her story was told and that this wouldn't happen to somebody else.
Was your mother hooked up to any monitoring equipment when she was admitted? So they were literally making her comfortable and getting her prepared.
That's what they call it. There was no monitors set up when I was with her in the cardiac unit. There was an IV, but that was about it, which they came in to check periodically, but not long enough to see and witness what I saw.
And the doctor, at the time that he was telling you that he'd never seen such a high level of carbon dioxide, he was not preparing you for the possibility that these could be her last moments.
No, he just said they were making her comfortable. As far as what that looked like or how long, I had no idea. I
To
just,
me, that's code. That's
Mhm.
code, and it doesn't make sense to someone whose loved one is there. That is not clear at all. That's doctor talk.
Yeah,
That's medical talk. We're making them comfortable. She's comfortable. That is not a preparation in any way. It's not clear communication.
no, no, it isn't. But again, that's another part of their four pillars that I'm going to call BS on, and that is the aspect of communication. And the other aspect is they call participation, like getting, information across with family and communicating what the family needs to know. None of that. None of those four pillars that they have on their website was anything that I witnessed or experienced.
Are you feeling the need to communicate with the hospital and put your story in front of them right now? Well, not right now, but
I'm going to post this video of this conversation. They can see it
Mhm.
and they can hear it. I don't think a letter would do it justice. I don't think a social media post in writing would do it justice. I'm going to post this video and tag the hospital and ask my friends, my family, and followers to share this story because, like I said, you don't know whose life you could potentially be saving.
I want to pull some key things that are important. Okay, so that piece around we're making her comfortable, the communication, preparing family members that this is looking like this is it.
Mhm.
And
I was
just
told not going to, they didn't recommend treatments. So that pretty much tells me that this is end stage. That's about it.
um, that's one thing for sure, the communication. The idea of, again, we don't know how to deal with dying, and we're not set up to have people die. Hospices, I'm going to make a light joke here. People are dying to get in. There are not enough beds for palliative care. But
Mhm.
even the palliative care system, it's sort of like that your situation is not going to improve, and there's going to be sort of a timeline that they're going to watch for, and then when a bed frees up, the person that is kind of closest to their end of life is going to be brought in. But all these other people that aren't able to access a bed in the palliative unit. You know, are there palliative physicians or teams that are helping families get prepared, or just be on that same page? That to me, I think, is a really big one. Um,
There's so much that could have been done better. So much. And to be honest, I had a completely different experience when my dad passed at a different hospital.
what happened? What happened with that?
Yeah, so he had passed. We got a call that this could be it. It was in the middle of the night. By the time we had gotten to the hospital, and this was North York General, just as we had arrived, he passed away. But what the nursing staff told us is that it was one of the most peaceful transitions they had ever witnessed. So they were with him, obviously, and they knew that he was going to probably transition. And nursing staff have generally a lot of experience with this because they've seen this sort of thing multiple times. And then they asked us if they could just have some time to check and prep and have the coroner see him. And so it was a completely different experience. We weren't in the room when they were checking his pulse or his pupils or whatever it is that you do to verify that someone had passed away. And when they were done, they asked us to come in the room. And they put us in a private space, in a private room, so that we could have some moments as a family with my dad. It was a completely different experience. And though it was 6 years ago, I remember it distinctly. The nursing staff there told us that they needed to have the coroner see him. I guess it's the coroner. I'm not sure, but whatever doctor checks you. And we weren't in the room when they were doing that. And once all that was done, then we were told, okay, you can come in and take as much time as you need. It was a completely different experience. And at least I know that his passing was peaceful. I do know that, like I said in previous chats that you and I have had here, that I was able to talk about the other parts of what happened in that space, that I got the opportunity to do Reiki on her, that I had the opportunity to pray with her and play messages from all my family saying their goodbyes because they couldn't be there. I did get those moments, and I do have that. And I do acknowledge that. But the rest still continues to cause me a lot of pain. And I struggle a lot. And if there is somebody here watching who's some form of healthcare practitioner or something that can help me through this piece, this is a call for help.
In terms of the process of just kind of knowing that there's a lot of, excuse me, I'm just in the middle of something. Just knowing that there's a lot of the same kind of thing that's going on everywhere across long-term care. Thousands of people have died. Hundreds of people that we know of passed away because of neglect alone. And it is just utterly, utterly heartbreaking to think about that. And I mean, your story is unique to, your mother, but the idea that the healthcare system is broken, and then COVID on top of that has just really, nurses are leaving the profession like crazy. They can't handle it. And I say, I don't blame you a bit. and we definitely need to fix what's going on there and make these workplaces livable,
Mhm.
right? And in my own experience in supporting my husband and his mother through a very near death experience, several near death experiences, I wrote a post on Facebook, and it was kind of lengthy, and it just basically said that I have never seen so many people that are zombies,
Mhm.
that are out of it,
Mhm.
that are so like just robotic. And those are the staff members. Those are the staff members. It boggles my mind how people can operate that way in their work, you
Wow.
know. And I honestly believe that people go in there with all of the best intentions, but the system doesn't allow you to be whole.
Right.
It's not a healthy place to work. The way that people are um, being taken care of is a direct reflection on the wellness of the people who are caring for them.
Yeah.
And I have to say that there were some. We had a binder, and we kept track of everything, all of her medications, all of the teams of doctors, because there's multiple teams that were taking care of her. And then one team of doctors is prescribing stuff, while another team of doctors is doing something where they shouldn't be having any prescriptions, any medication, any antibiotics, and they're not talking to each other. So if we're not there, there's potential for disaster. And
Absolutely.
I feel so blessed and lucky that, as a yoga teacher, I have the flexibility in my schedule. We would get there in the morning, bathe her. I would go into the hospital room and get my basin. First of all, make sure she ate, because sometimes they've got the food on the table and they have no energy. My mother-in-law couldn't even lift her arms.
Right.
So making sure she got properly fed, making sure that she was clean. I brought my little rose body wash and tried to, perfume her. I took skin brushes and did my circulation practice with the skin
Oh,
brushing because, you know, and then I brought in like a salt lamp. I had the salt lamp in the corner of the room, and this was in a ward, so there's three other people there. And I know one lady that was kitty corner. She was really jealous and tried to get her son. Look, see that girl. I want you to do the same thing she used to. It was kind of like a spa morning every day, just to kind of get her to be feeling alive.
yeah.
But there were several situations where she would be going for tests, and I would just see through the window. They would just pick her up like a big piece of dead meat. They would throw her onto the machine. It's just so awful. And then there was just, a couple of characters there that were so awful. And my husband almost punched this one doctor's lights out because he was such an arrogant person. We said we don't want students working on her because they had to get needles in her neck.
Oh my
And we
gosh.
said we don't want student nurses or student doctors going in there and doing that stuff. I mean, she was like 89 at the time, so treating her like a pincushion. Everything was black and blue, and then having trouble finding veins. Just get somebody really experienced to do that. And we found out that they were like the student doctors were working on her, and my husband lost his mind. And the main doctor, the main guy or whatever, he was just so arrogant. And you can't be telling us what to do. This is a teaching hospital. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the last thing that we want to be dealing with right now. This is not a healing environment. Then you're
No.
dealing with industrial sounds all the time too, like all these beepings and noises, and
Right.
oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's so
Everything you're saying.
the idea of us getting used to the idea of living at home until we die, because being in a hospital is no way to die. Hooked
No.
up to machines? No. In a room by yourself? No. Or in a room with other people who are also sick, coughing, diarrhea, the room smells terrible. Like I remember bringing in my lavender, my peppermint oils, and kind of clearing the space. I couldn't sage, obviously, but you can't bring a lighter and start igniting things. But yeah, this is not a good place for people to transition. And I know that there are some folks that are kind of getting um, more funding and more resources around, aging in place and home hospice care. Looking back now, if there had been some kind of, and we've had this conversation about Dan's mom, that there won't be any more resuscitation attempts.
Hmm.
And for these doctors to have had a conversation with you and your family to say, okay, so this is where we're going. This is what the road looks like. And here are a couple of markers along the road. And we'd like you to be a part of the decision-making process about what kind of care you would like to have undertaken.
Right.
So that people can be prepared, you know,
Yeah.
and that there's a formula, you
Right.
know.
That part was all in place. We had the tough questions about resuscitation before, so I knew what, my mom wanted in terms of that. But how do we
Yes.
how do we wrap up tonight so that we can in some way um, bring closure to this conversation, but not leave everyone who's listening to this feeling like we are right now. Um,
I like to think about your father welcoming your mother into his arms as she was passing away,
mhm.
and that they were able to see the pain that you were in going through that, and seeing that pain that you've been suffering with, the trauma, and that they're trying to comfort you in different ways to let you know that they're okay right now. And then you being brave and courageous to bring this problem to light and to share this story so that other people can be aware and to watch
Yeah,
out for them. The
please.
racialization, that
Yes.
piece, I really feel like that needs to be addressed,
I
and
agree.
in some kind of written form, or through some kind of patient advocate or an ombudsman of some sort. But oh my gosh, again, this is not getting better. Our healthcare system's not going to get better. We're
Hmm.
going to have to get smarter about staying out of the healthcare system as long as possible, or for thinking about what's going on. There's going to be a lot more older people entering the healthcare system, and it's at the end of life that we have all of that. So how can there be some sort of awareness around the compassion, awareness around the preparation and the dignity? I'm so
Yes.
grateful that you share these very difficult conversations, Farhan. Very difficult.
Yeah. Again, because it's you, Deborah, I think it's why I'm able to talk about it because I haven't been able to, not even with my therapist, not even with my closest friends. I have not been able to talk about it.
In the last couple months that we've been talking about this, we talk about waves of grief and where the grief shows up in our bodies, and these crying jags, and these moments where we get emotionally overwhelmed, and today is one of those days. Last week was one of those weeks too. I was really feeling really super emotional, and I've been doing some volunteer work at the Carpenter Hospice in Burlington for since
Oh,
2008, and I just love the wellness group. You know, everybody there has some kind of a life limiting diagnosis, and they just what I love about doing that work is that I learn so much from them. You know,
mm,
I'm not the teacher, they're the teacher. And
mm,
they remind me of what's important. You know, they remind me the sanctity of life, how precious it is, and the joy. And with COVID, we have not been able to do in-person classes. We've been doing some online classes, but I got a call and I just been so, you know, emotional because of course, you know, people die in that group. People die in my family. I've had a couple of people that passed away. My friends' parents. You know, there's been a lot, just like wave after wave, and sometimes you can't come up for air. You're just like rolling around in these waves of bad news.
right.
And then, you know, I got an email from my boss at the Carpenter Hospice, and she says, we formed the Joy Committee, and we need to get some yoga going on for our staff members. So come on down. So tomorrow, the Joy Committee is having a command performance for their staff members because they are just so overwhelmed too.
Wow.
Um, but, you know, in a palliative care environment, that's you're wearing your hat as a palliative care professional. So that idea about compassion is front and center, and we
God
need
bless you
to.
for doing this and spreading joy to those staff because they deserve it. They need it, especially in palliative care with everything that they do. You are an angel, Deborah. You really are.
Um, you know what? Honestly, that was the last thing I ever saw myself doing because my
Right.
grandmother, she wanted me to be a nurse. I'd be like, a nurse? Oh, forget about that. That's about sick people. Sick people. I don't want to be anywhere near sick people. Okay, that's not fun.
Right.
I'm going to just have fun. But I learned so much. And I see the joy that they have. You know, they don't know how much time they've got left, but really,
Right.
we don't either, right?
No.
So they remind me. It's just today is all we've got. Got to be happy today. Just squeeze out a couple of happy moments out of today. And I am so grateful that we talk about, you know, modern masculinity.
Hmm.
Part of our problem with people being on edge and losing their temper and people losing their minds out there is because we don't know how to handle these difficult emotions. And
Mm.
talking about it is really important. But all the other things that we've been talking about too, getting outside, meditating, breathing, doing, you know, fitness, doing yoga, restorative,
Right.
journaling, art, expressing yourself in
Right.
creativity. I am
Yes.
so grateful that you have this platform that you're sharing as you are going through this. It's fresh for you, and I'm
Thank you.
learning a lot, and I'm so grateful for your friendship. Thank you.
Likewise. I'm gonna put you on a little bit of a spot. I know in the last couple of conversations, I've ended with a meditation, and I got really good feedback with that. But I think I'm gonna maybe request if you could end tonight with a prayer for all our loved ones in the hospital, anyone who's going through an illness. And if you're following along, it doesn't matter what faith you belong to. I'm just gonna ask you, Deborah, to say a universal prayer to help uplift us all, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd be honored. I'd be honored. So just, you know, finding a comfortable way to sit, closing our eyes and drawing awareness from the brain where we do all of our thinking and ruminating, and drawing our awareness down into the heart. Just taking a couple of deep breaths and acknowledging the hurt, the despair, the pain, we're feeling, not only for ourselves, but for so many people that are suffering right now, whether they are in the hospital, whether they are caring for people who are in the hospital or at home, the people that are in the caring professions that are so burnt out and just at their end of their rope, and just holding all of these people in our hearts, taking a few breaths. And just acknowledging the sanctity of life, acknowledging the preciousness of this day that we have. Praying to relieve suffering, and knowing that our Creator did not bring us into being to suffer, only suffer, that we can be reminded of the joys of life, that we can distill those precious memories, laughter, and meaningful moments. And that energy is penetrating every one of our cells. And through that, we have strength. We have the strength to get through these painful, painful moments. And that we can reach out and care for each other, hold space, let each other express what's in our heart and on our mind. And that we can learn from each other and support each other to help other people and reduce their suffering into the future. Amen. Let it be. Thank you.
So it is. Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. We have a message here. You look who says, "You are so blessed, Deborah. You are pure." I agree. And to our friend here, who's Susan A46, who says, "My father passed away last Monday, so I find these chats comforting." We witness you, Susan. We honor the space where you are, and we send prayers for your father, for your family. We send prayers for comfort to all those right now who are dealing with grief, no matter what its source. Thank you for joining us. Good night.